My name is Marc Alan Urbach. I live in Dunwoody. I'm a constitutional scholar, self-taught. I'm a Supreme Court scholar in terms of the cases that remove religion from our schools. I'm a former teacher of Gwinnett County of 11 years. I'm a very loyal and dedicated Orthodox Jew who has the utmost respect and love for all my Christian brothers and sisters in this great Christian nation. The greatest Christian nation in the history of the world, not by law, but by culture, tradition, and history. Even my Jewish friends will acknowledge that, the smart ones. Okay, so tonight's presentation is the Supreme Court removing religious freedom from the schools. I'm going to focus on 6 Supreme Court cases starting in 1947. Before I say anything else, I'll just say a quick prayer. It's a 22-word prayer that was legal in 1951 in the great state of New York. And I put pens on your table, so this is for you to take home to fill in the blanks, and we're going to discuss it. And we're going to do it really, really quick. We're going to go over 6 Supreme Court cases in 23 minutes. Okay, so here's the prayer. Almighty God, we acknowledge our dependence upon Thee, and we beg Thy blessings upon us, our parents, our teachers, our soldiers, and our country. That was legal in 1951. It lasted for 11 years, and then in 1962 it was challenged. It goes all the way to the Supreme Court. In the famous Supreme Court case, Engel v. Vitale, Hugo Black and 5 other justices in a 6-1 decision said it was illegal. And teacher-led prayer was made illegal for the first time in the history of this nation. Well, it was legal and constitutionally protected for 175 years in this great nation until 1962. Okay? That's 1962. Let's backtrack to the first Supreme Court case is 1947. Number 1 is Everson versus the Board of Education. We're not going to discuss the gist of the case, but the ruling from Justice Hugo Black, who was a Supreme Court justice for 34 years. He was appointed by President FDR. He was nominated by the Senate, and he served on the court for 34 years, and he basically removed religion from the schools in our society. Okay, he said, quote, "The First Amendment has created a wall of separation between church and state. That wall must be kept high and impregnable. We cannot approve the slightest breach." But that's not what the First Amendment created. The First Amendment says, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof." Now, what does that mean? Okay, before you look at a law, you don't look at the words or try to figure out the meaning of a law. You always ask yourself, why was the law created in the first place? Why did the Founding Fathers create the First Amendment? Okay, they didn't want what they had in England, the mother country, which was an established church for the nation, the Anglican Church, and an established denomination of Christianity for the nation, which was the Anglican Protestant religion. Thus, if you're a minority Christian, a Catholic, or obviously a Jewish person, you can be discriminated against and persecuted against. The Founding Fathers didn't want that in this nation. They established the exact opposite. Congress, we know what Congress is, shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. This is the tricky part. If you just look at the words, it'll fool you. If you study the debates surrounding the First Amendment like I have and other scholars that I've worked with, the meaning of that is that Congress cannot establish one denomination of Christianity for the nation, nor can they establish a church for the nation, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That means you and me are allowed to practice our religion freely from the federal government intruding on our religious rights. That's the true original intent and meaning of the First Amendment. Okay? Hugo Black had no idea of the true meaning of the First Amendment, and that's why he came up with this crazy quote of his. Okay? I flew by the quote about James Wilson, but I'll say it right now. In terms of how you should look at laws, always discover why they were created in the first place. The first and governing maxim in the interpretation of a statute is to discover the meaning of those who made it. Again, why the Founding Fathers create the First Amendment, we've already discussed that. Okay, I'm sorry we're flying so quickly, but we're just running really, really short on time. Okay. Okay. So I'm just going to read to you a real quote out of my book, which is Believe, Do We Need a Third Great Awakening? It's an excellent, excellent book. Every single person who read it says it's one of the greatest books they've ever read. They've written me letters. I've written them letters back, and I have signed copies here if you'd like to get a copy. I guarantee you if you write me a letter, I'll write you a letter back. On page 52, I'll read to you his own words. I'm a historian. I like to use private or primary source documents, not my opinions, but people's own words from the case Everson versus the Board of Education. Proves that Hugo Black had no idea what the Establishment Clause meant. He says, quote, "The Establishment of Religion Clause of the First Amendment means at least this. Neither a state nor the federal government can set up a church." That's half correct, half a lie. Because at the time of the ratification of the Bill of Rights, there were some states that had official state churches, such as Connecticut. They had an official state church. That's why the Danbury Baptists wrote a letter to Thomas Jefferson complaining about that. That's a fact. Okay, that is a fact. There were established state churches. I know for a fact one, that was in Connecticut. There might have been others. Okay, the next of his quote. This is really key. neither, he's referring to neither the federal government or the state governments, neither can pass laws which aid one religion, aid all religions, or prefer one religion over another. That's completely wrong. The state of Georgia, and all the states back when the First Amendment was ratified, they can support a religion. But according to Hugo Black, they can't. This is the great paradigm shift in 1947, where he completely misinterpreted Thomas Jefferson's phrase, a wall of separation between church and state. He probably never studied the Founding Fathers like I have. He probably never studied the letter from the Danbury Baptists to Jefferson and Jefferson's letter back to the Danbury Baptists. Okay? And that's a big problem. Okay? A really big problem when he misinterprets that phrase. Okay? All the phrase meant was that Jefferson and Madison wanted to prevent any established churches in the states. That's all it means, separate the church and the state. Okay? What Hugo Black did since 1947, and all the other justices that agree with him and follow his precepts, is anything religious in the schools is now illegal. And thus it's affected society also. Okay, there's been thousands and thousands of cases removing religion from society and especially the schools. Okay, the next Supreme Court case is real quick, McCollum versus the Board of Education in 1948. This dealt with teaching the Bible in the schools. For over 150 years, it was very legal and constitutionally protected to teach the Bible in the schools at any grade level at any time. Until 1948, an atheist sued, goes all the way to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court sided with one atheist, and then teaching the Bible was made illegal. Okay, this door didn't slam shut in 48, and they said no more Bible teaching. But that's where the case that started the precedent. And I have this book here, the great city of Dallas, Texas. This is an official course that the students could take to learn the Bible. This is a reprint Bible study course, Old Testament Dallas City Schools, and I just forgot to bring the New Testament book, but this was a course offered in 1954. Okay, I would think, I taught for 11 years, I don't know if there's even 1% of schools in this nation that teach the Bible as the Bible. They can only teach it as a history book now. Okay, that's probably less than 1% of all the schools in America. That's a problem. Okay, it's a problem. Let me tell you some quotes of the Founding Fathers, how they felt about the Bible and the importance of the Bible in society and in the schools. The Bible is the best of all books, for it is the Word of God and teaches us the way to be happy in this world and in the next. Continue, therefore, to read and regulate your life by its precepts. That was John Jay, the first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. Another one is, the Bible is the best book in the world. It contains more of my little philosophy than all the libraries I have seen. That was President John Adams. They probably didn't mention that in the HBO series. Okay. The next two quotes specifically deal with keeping the Bible in the classroom. Okay. Has anybody heard of Dr. Benjamin Rush? Okay, one gentleman. He's quite possibly the top 5 of the Founding Fathers underneath Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, or Samuel Adams, and Dr. Benjamin Rush. No one's ever heard of this guy. I've got a whole chapter devoted to him in my book. He says, quote, and he was the father of American schools. Let me see, I'm losing my quotes. I'm going through so much time. The great enemy of the salvation of man never invented a more effectual means of extinguishing Christianity from the world than by persuading mankind that it was improper to read the Bible in schools. The Bible, when not read in schools, is seldom read in any subsequent period of life. It should be read in our schools in preference to all other books, from that is containing the greatest portion of that kind of knowledge, which is calculated to produce private and temporal happiness. Dr. Benjamin Rush, leading abolitionist, father of American schools, helped start the first black church in America, the AME Church, a righteous to the core Orthodox evangelical Christian, and a signer of the Declaration of Independence, Dr. Benjamin Rush, and he did not think keeping the Bible in the classroom violated separation of church and state. The most compelling quote I have is, anybody ever heard of Fisher Ames? A righteous to the core Christian founding father, yet we don't know these men, or most of the population has never heard of these men. His quote is extremely compelling. He was very, very worried about the amount of secular textbooks being introduced in the classroom. He was extremely worried that one day the Bible would be pushed to the back of the classroom, if not out of the classroom. And his quote is, "Why then should not the Bible regain the place it once held as a school book? Its morals are pure, its examples captivating and noble. The reverence for the sacred book that is thus early impressed lasts long, and probably, if not impressed in infancy, never takes firm hold of the mind." Fisher Ames, get this, he helped write the First Amendment to the Constitution. And he wanted to keep the Bible always in the classroom. That's the way it was in the Founding Father era. That's the way it was all throughout the 1800s up until the 1960s, when all this became illegal. Okay? And he didn't believe it violated separation of church and state. Did you know that Thomas Jefferson's letter containing the phrase, "a wall of separation of church and state," was written 13 years after the Bill of Rights were created? That's a fact. The next Supreme Court case is very, very important. is Anglo Vitale, 1962, where teacher-led prayer became illegal, yet it was legal for 175 years in this great nation. Okay, so why did it become illegal? Because of Hugo Black started the precedent in 1947 using the phrase a wall of separation between church and state. Okay, let's fill in the blanks real quick. It's in the state of New York. Okay, number 3, state of New York. And I already said the prayer, but I'll say it real quick. Almighty God, we acknowledge our dependence upon Thee, and we beg Thy blessings upon us, our parents, our teachers, and our country. Completely, let's fill in the blanks real quick. I'll go through them real quick. Again, I love to ask questions, but we don't have the time. The prayer is neutral, non-denominational, non-sectarian. The court did not use, do we have any lawyers in the classroom? I mean, in the room? I'm talking so fast, I can't keep track of myself. All right, the word is precedent, not president, precedent. P-R-E-C-E-D-E-N-T, precedent. What is a precedent? A precedent are previous court decisions that the current court uses to help them come to their conclusion. The court didn't use any precedents. Now the question is, why not? Because there were none. For 175 years following the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, no court in the history of America had struck down any prayer in the public schools until 1962. And in my opinion, when you remove God's words, His laws, His precepts, and philosophies from the hearts and minds of students in 1 to 2 to 3 generations, you have what we have today, in my opinion. Tremendous pockets of sin, vice, and crime, murder, abortion, rampant anarchy that can flare up, and all the other evils of society we have in this great nation. We are the greatest nation in the history of the world right now, except we have pockets of sin and evil all over the place, and it's only getting worse. And we've had the most ultra-liberalism and socialism I've ever seen in the history of this nation by far. Okay? Potter Stewart was the lone judge that dissented. He stood out in the crowd. It was a 6-1 decision. He dissented. His quote is extremely powerful and extremely correct. We'll read it at the bottom of page 1 and page 2. Quote, "With all respect, I think the court has misapplied a great constitutional principle. I cannot see how an official religion has been established by letting those who want to say a prayer say it. On the contrary," page 2, "on the contrary, I think that to deny the wish of these school children to join in reciting this prayer is to deny them the opportunity of sharing in the spiritual heritage of this nation." That's exactly correct. This prayer does not establish any religion. It simply acknowledges God one time. So does anyone think this prayer establishes a religion? It doesn't establish Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam. It mentions God one time like the pledge. There's no establishment created. Yet the Supreme Court, Hugo Black and his 5 justices said it's illegal. Okay. We're going to skip Black's quote right there. We don't have the time. What religion was established in 1962 in the classrooms of this great nation? You're almost right. It starts with an A. Atheism. Atheism, the religion of no religion. I taught for 11 years in Gwinnett County. And I'm just telling you right now, this is a fact all across America, because I know that all these freedoms are now illegal. The religion in the classroom for a student in grades 1 through 12 in this great nation is 99.99, all the nines, atheism in this nation. That's the religion in the classroom. But I thought the Congress couldn't establish a religion, but they have through the Supreme Court, removing our freedoms. I taught for 11 years. In the great state of Georgia, the only time students learn religion from grades 8 to 12 is the world history course. Every student in this state takes it. I had 1 day to teach Judaism, 1 day to teach Christianity, 1 day for Hinduism, 1 day for Buddhism, and 3 to 4 days for Islam. And that's another presentation. Okay. Yes, let's get to the next Supreme Court case, the 10 Commandment case, 1980 Stone v. Graham. Okay, we're on track. We're going to make it right now. All right. The question was, the state of Kentucky, that's where the first one in the blank, the state of Kentucky had a law that the 10 Commandments would be posted in all the classrooms in the school. Stone didn't like it. He sued I think it was the principal Graham. It goes all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States, and the Supreme Court said that's illegal and unconstitutional. I agree with the decision. I wouldn't want the 10 Commandments in all the classrooms, but I do want them in the history classroom because that's where they belong. They form the foundation of Western civilization and civilizations through the millennium. Okay, but listen to the wording of the Supreme Court, the most ridiculous decision I've ever read on top of Roe v. Wade's decision. Okay, look at the wording. I'll read it out loud to you. Posting of the religious text on the wall serves no educational purpose. It gets worse. It gets worse. I'm glad you're chuckling because I couldn't believe when I read this. If the posted copies of the 10 Commandments are to have any effect at all, it will be to induce the school children to read, meditate upon, perhaps to venerate and obey the commandments. However desirable this might be as a private devotion, it is not a permissible state objective under the Establishment Clause. I told you it's the craziest decision I've ever heard in my life. The Supreme Court of the United States said the 10 Commandments on the wall do not serve an educational purpose. It's mind-boggling. It gets worse. The Supreme Court does not want our students to read, meditate upon, perhaps to venerate and obey the commandments. It is not an objective of the state. I'm not going to say all the 10 commandments. I know them by heart, but thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not honor thy father and mother, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet, thou shalt not bear false witness. The Supreme Court of the United States doesn't want our children to learn these things.
They don't want any competition.
Right. Now you know why we're in the state we're in. It gets worse. In 1992, Levi Weissman, the rabbi, was asked to give a benediction, invocation benediction for the school. He gave a non-denominational, non-sectarian, neutral. It was perfect. It's in my book. He mentioned God twice. It was very uplifting. Except it goes to the Supreme Court. They say they're illegal now. No more invocation benedictions. Yet they were legal for over 170 years. Okay. The last case is 1999 Santa Fe Independent School District versus Doe. It dealt with prayer at athletic games. Prayer at athletic games were always legal and constitutionally protected in this great Christian nation for over 180 years. Until 1999, the Supreme Court, through the misinterpretation of the wall separating church and state, said now they're illegal. My friends, this is where we are in America today, the greatest Christian nation in the history of the world, not by law again, but because of the Supreme Court starting in 47 with Hugo Black, all these freedoms are now illegal. The only one that is legal is teaching the 10 Commandments, and like I said, I experienced it for 11 years. Get this. Here's the question. In world history course, I told you I had 1 day to teach Judaism, 1 day for Christianity and the other religions. How much time do you think in a child's education in Gwinnett County, which is probably like all the other counties in Georgia, how much time in 12 years is spent teaching the 10 Commandments? Anybody, just take a stab at it. 10 minutes. I had 10 minutes to teach my students the 10 Commandments. I had to teach all the other stuff in that 1 day about Judaism. Now, I taught 8th grade. They don't learn in 8th grade. Do they learn it in grades 1 through 7? I don't know for sure, but if they do, you're saying no. If they do, they don't remember when the time they get to 9th grade, so it's a moot point. When you remove God's words, His philosophies, His precepts, and His laws from the minds and hearts of students in 1 to 2 to 3 generations, you have what we have today. Ultra-liberalism to the max, pockets of sin and anarchy and crime and murder and all the evils of society. I wish I had time to read you, let's fill in the blanks. Let's fill in the blanks. Before I do, I'll tell you the quote from Joseph's story, quite possibly the smartest Supreme Court justice we've ever had, that proves Hugo Black was wrong, that proves religion belongs to the people in the states. Quote, the whole power over the subject of religion is left exclusively to the state governments to be acted upon according to their own sense of justice and the state constitutions. Religion, your freedom of religion and mine and the states belongs to the states, not the federal government. Let's fill in the blanks. At the bottom of page 2, the purpose of the First Amendment was not to protect Americans from religion. It was to protect religion from government regulation, from government intrusion. That's a fact. That's a fact. The Bill of Rights was a declaration of what the federal government cannot do. The federal government cannot regulate our freedom of religion, our speech, our press, our assembly, and the right to petition the government for redress of grievances. Yet through the Supreme Court the last 70 years, they've done that. They've chipped away at our gun rights. Obviously, they've destroyed religious rights. Okay. The Supreme Court has ruled, the Supreme Court of the United States has usurped their authority, ruled on cases it should have never heard. They should have never heard these education cases. Education is not an enumerated power of the Congress. That's a fact. Okay, they've ruled on them. Thomas Jefferson has some very, very, very important quotes. He knew exactly what the Supreme Court was already turning into when he was alive, and he predicted what it was going to turn into. He predicted the Civil War 41 years before it became fruition. He says, quote, the Constitution on this hypothesis is a mere thing of wax in the hands of the judiciary, which they may twist and shape in any form they please. The Supreme Court has taken the Constitution and shredded it and twisted it anything they want it to look like. They've done it. The next quote is, we'll skip that because that's a similar quote. We don't have the time. Let's go to the page 3. I'm sorry, the last page. The last page. A couple quick quotes. I'm down to 5 minutes. I'm doing good. Like I said, this is normally a 45-minute presentation. I'm so sorry. I wish we had more time. We will have time for questions. Let's look at the 4 quotes at the top. Let's look at the first one and the fourth one. George Washington, General and President George Washington, an incredibly righteous Christian man who the professors in the Ivy Leagues call him a deist, but that's not true at all. Quote, it is the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of Almighty God, to obey His will, to be grateful for His benefits, and humbly to implore His protection and favor. End quote. Now, remember that I told you that in McCollum versus Board of Education, 1948, they made the Bible illegal, teaching the Bible illegal? Well, obviously they don't think the Bible is important. Listen to this quote from James McHenry, who was a signer of the Constitution and Secretary of War underneath President Washington and President John Adams. This is extremely valuable. I wish the American Communist Liberal Union, the ACLU, better known as the American Civil Liberties Union, and the Freedom from Religion Foundation, those wicked atheists up in Wisconsin, the American Humanists, will watch this videotape and really listen to this quote about how important the Bible is in society from a righteous Christian founding father. Quote, "The Holy Scriptures," that's the Bible, "the Holy Scriptures can alone secure to society order and peace. In vain, without the Bible, we increase penal laws and draw entrenchments around our institutions. Bibles are strong entrenchments. Where they abound, men cannot pursue wicked courses." James McHenry, signer of the Constitution, Secretary of War underneath Washington and John Adams. Okay? Now, I'll close with a benediction from a quote from a righteous Christian founding father, Charles Carroll of Carrollton, who signed the Declaration of Independence, and then a prayer that I say every morning in my prayer book. The first one. Now, there's people criticizing Christians all over this nation. They sue Christians, they sue the school districts, they prevent them from saying prayers at games and all the other religious things that students want to do, and they win because they threaten with lawsuits with humongous amounts of money, and the principals don't know this information. They don't have a clue about all this historical, factual information, so they cave into the ACLU and the Freedom from Religion organization and the American Humanists. But listen to this quote. "Without morals, a republic cannot subsist any length of time. They, therefore, who are decrying the Christian religion, whose morality is so sublime and pure, are undermining the solid foundation of morals, the best security for the duration of free governments." Charles Carroll of Carrollton, a righteous Christian founding father who signed the Declaration of Independence. And the last one. I'll end this that I say every morning in my prayer book. Quote, "I hope the judges of America, every single judge in this country, is not following the precepts of our founding fathers. They have been lied to about the separation of church and state, and they're following Hugo Black's belief and philosophy. Almighty God, restore our judges as in early times and our counselors as at first. Remove from us sorrow and groan and reign over us. You, God, alone with kindness and compassion, and justify us through judgment. Blessed are you, God, who loves righteousness and judgment." Page 107. So that was a extremely quick, abbreviated version of 6 Supreme Court cases that have removed, once again, teacher leading students in prayer. Neutral prayer is now illegal. Teaching the Bible is illegal. Invocations and benedictions are illegal. Prayers at athletic games are illegal. And the 10 Commandments, in my experience of 11 years, I only had 10 minutes to teach it. So that's the state of affairs we are in this great nation. Things will continue to get worse, in my opinion, until you and I and all the other citizens in America change the laws and pressure these politicians to get into the principals' heads, get into the state legislators' heads with this information and tell them the truth, because all this information was the truth, except you knew when I was impugning my opinion. But everything else is the God's honest truth. Okay? My prayer book says, "Always let a person be God-fearing, privately and publicly, acknowledge the truth and speak the truth from his heart." Okay? Now all of you are foot soldiers. What are you going to do with this information? I don't know. That's up to you. The only way we're going to put these religious freedoms back into the schools, honestly, is we need a test case. Linda Brown, the black girl in 1954 who challenged separate but equal in the schools, they took it to the Supreme Court with Thurgood Marshall and they won. That was a test case. Rosa Parks was a test case. Is there any children of yours or grandchild that has the guts to say a prayer out loud in the classroom and willing to take the consequences of being sent down to the principal's office and said, "Don't do that again"?
My daughter would have.
Okay, now, she could be a test case. Don't do it right now, because if it goes to court, we will lose bad. I think the population is 25% will support this and 75% will be against it. A lot of Christians in this nation don't want these freedoms to be put back because they don't know the truth about them. They think they're just going to warp the children's minds. Is that low of a percentage of people that want these? It's like 80% that don't. So please don't have your daughter test it right now.
I thought you meant she's grown now.
Oh.
She would have been one of those that would have stood up
Well,
and said,
you can try it and see what happens. You can try and see what happens, but we would lose in the courts in a second because we don't have the populace supporting these ideas. Okay? When should we do it? My daughter's in a private school, so she can't do it. She's not in a public school. But you have children in public schools. The time will come when the populace will back these freedoms. Okay, when they learn the facts. They got to learn the facts first. I'm on a campaign to go across as many cities that I can. 49 years old. I don't know how many. I've got another 50 years to go, and I'm not stopping. I've got a radio show that hopefully will start next week. So I'm just going to be preaching all this wonderful information along with all the other knowledge I have of the Constitution and other documents that I know about. We'll take a couple questions. Yes, sir.
Well, it sounds like a catch-22. If you don't exercise it, you lose the
Right.
I'm not standing up and saying it, but you're saying hold off and saying it. I think you should say it and suffer the consequences.
We should. You're exactly right. We should say it. It'll go to court, but we will lose in the courts. But it'll make that student stand out from the crowd, and they'll be a patriot like never before. Yes.
In your learned opinion, is Islam a religion or a philosophy or something else?
Well, it started 1,400 years ago. I think it's a belief structure, a political structure. It is some sort of religion, but it's been twisted like never before in the history of religion. That's a whole other presentation I can make. I'd like to thank Dan Coleman for staying with me in terms of emails and allowing me to present to you. I'd like to thank you so much for being here. May God bless you. May God bless your families, your friends, your church, your house of God. And may God continue to bless the Republic, the greatest Christian nation in the history of the world of the United States of America. Thank you. It's iTunes Radio Network. Yeah. Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you so much.
The schools get